This week, I wanted to make a video that is probably not very relevant to anybody else but me. I wasn't really planning on uploading this many videos to this channel. I had a few bees that I needed to get out of my bonnet, and I've done that. There were some topics that I felt I needed to talk about. Most of my life I have been religious, so there's really no one around in my personal life that I can talk to about these things, outside of arguing about them anyway. It's done now. I've made the handful of videos that I set out to make, and I'm not really quite sure where to go from here. I honestly never expected that there would be so many of you here subscribed to this channel and watching my videos. Now that you're all here, I kind of want to keep the channel going. I'm just not quite sure what all I have left to say. For now, the best thing I could come up with is talking about this book, Unlocking the Mysteries of Creation, by Dennis R. Peterson, first published in 1986. Now, I don't expect many of you, or more likely any of you at all, to have heard of this book, or to care what's in it, but this book holds in my heart a special place of nostalgia mingled with outright contempt. This book was an important part of my homeschooled education. It was treated like a science book. I had to read through it chapter by chapter, and my dad crafted a test for me to take after each chapter to make sure that I was absorbing the information, if you want to call it that this book had to offer. We had, actual books about science in the house. My parents would read through them before I was allowed to look at them, and they would take Sharpie markers and black out the parts that they didn't want me to know about. So my only real understanding of what evolution was came from sources like this. There were other Young Earth Creationist so-called learning materials in my house growing up as well, from people like Ken Ham, but this book stands out above all the others in my memory, probably because it was the only one that I had to take a formal test on. I kind of wanted to look back on it, now that I know a little bit more about what the science actually says, and see just how goofy it really was. So I ordered a copy online, and I'm a little disappointed to find that this is not the edition of the book that I grew up with. The book is full of photographs and illustrations, and I can't remember how much of it has changed, but I know that it has changed because of this cartoon right here. This is not the illustration that I grew up with. The one I grew up with looked more like this, as closely as I can recall, and as closely as I can recreate it. This round-headed Professor Honeydew-looking motherfucker right here. So, if you will indulge me, let us take a walk down memory lane as we dive into this delightful tome and see what sort of wisdom Dennis R. Peterson has to offer. We are going to jump around quite a bit. So much of this book is just Dennis Peterson bewailing the fact that science follows evidence alone without appealing to the authority of Scripture. There are Bible verses and sermons, and I don't care. We're just going to skip around and look at some of the juicier morsels that this book has to offer. Starting off in the preface, we read, "Respectable-sounding narrators distort the truth according to the warped atheism or paganism of the intellectual elite." Then, on the very first page of the actual text, past the preface and the table of contents and the cover pages, we read, "But what do our pagan experts who boast in their unsacred philosophy say these days?"
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Pagan, a person holding religious beliefs other than those of the main or recognized religions. I'm not sure where exactly to draw the line between recognized and unrecognized religions. I'm sure Peterson regards any religion apart from Christianity to be unrecognized religion, but I'm not convinced that a majority, or even a large percentage, of the experts that he is referring to here qualify as both religious and not Christian. Of course, there is no citation given here to back up such a claim, but I'm not sure that Peterson was even attempting to make such a claim. I expect that he merely uses the word pagan as a slur, and this unsupported, bigoted name-calling is a fair indicator of the level of professionalism that we can expect to find throughout the rest of this reading. Moving on, we read, "Notice the words in Genesis 1:1. In the beginnings, right at the start, God created the heavens. Look it up and you'll find the original Hebrew word for heavens there is Shamayim. It simply means stretched out space, which is kind of incredible, right? How did the authors of Genesis know that space was expanding? This must be the divinely inspired word of God. Except that's not what the word Shamayim means. It translates to heavens and is derived from the words like water or possibly fire and water. An honest mistake, I'm sure. Keep this in mind because it will be important later. Next, we read, "Scientists once used the cloud model to depict the atom. Now they realize the atom is far more complex than they first imagined. The simplified planetary model was popular for most of the 20th century. The recently developed Lucas model has no orbiting electrons, permitting the atom to remain stable, with electric and electromagnetic fields in equilibrium." What even is this? Sadly, Dennis Peterson does not offer any clue as to when this new atomic model was proposed, or by whom, outside of the implication that either his first name or his last name was probably Lucas, and there sure as hell isn't any bloody citation. So I went on to Google to learn about atomic models. According to Wikipedia, the cloud model, which, as Peterson puts it, scientists once used, is currently the accepted model of the atom. Interesting. So what is Peterson on about? What is the Lucas model? Well, I searched for the Lucas model on Google, and I got a little bit of this, and a whole lot of that, but absolutely nothing about what I would have thought would have been one of the most groundbreaking discoveries of the 20th century. So I searched for Lucas atomic model, and this came up, so let's give it a look. Historically, the theory of evolution has always been an appendage of the theory of matter, and specifically the theory of the atom. The current quantum mechanical theories of the atom represent the matter of the universe as being governed by random statistical processes. Thus, they provide the necessary theoretical foundations for the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution of living things requires random processes to occur to produce mutations or changes that can be directed to certain selection principles, such as survival of the fittest. This work identifies the false assumptions of the quantum models of the atom. It shows that these theories violate the logical principles that undergird the development of scientific theories and do not qualify as science. A new rudimentary theory of the atom based on combinatorial geometry is presented that can satisfactorily predict all of the properties of the periodic table of the elements, as well as explain the basis of chemical balance and bonding. This new theory of the atom is based on classical electrodynamics and represents an orderly universe governed by the laws of cause and effect. It satisfies the logical principles undergirding science, and it does not support theories of evolution. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is not an authentic, peer-reviewed science paper. And not just because of the uppercase C hanging out in the middle of their principles. Whoever wrote this thought that mutations, genetic mutations, occur at the atomic level. This is beyond goofy, and I shan't waste any more of your time on it. Moving on. It is interesting to notice that the Hebrew word for waters is mayim. The first instance of the word mayim is in a compounded form with the word sham, meaning there or in it. It is thus found as the word Shamayim, and is translated as heavens in Genesis 1:1. Oh, would you look at that? There it is again, Shamayim. The exact same word, 2 pages later, but this time it means something completely different from what he said it meant last time.
Keep using the word.
I don't even know how something like this happens. I don't know if Dennis had help and one person wrote one page and somebody else wrote the other, or if he just forgot the bullshit that he made up 2 pages ago. But either way, goddamn, what a terrible day to have a brain. Anyway, moving on. I just wanted to share this particular piece of propaganda with you. This image right here. This is how Dennis Peterson sees us, bowing down to the false god of science and knowledge. Almost as if he knows that his pseudoscience bullshit doesn't count as knowledge. Anywho, continuing on. What is a mutation? A mutation is a mistaken change in the genetic code, a loss of information. Most are considered neutral. They cause no noticeable change in the living creature. Harmful mutations are rare. Beneficial mutations do not exist. This is some gourmet prime rib level of falsehood, with this stupid-ass cartoon and this stupid-ass picture of a tomato. It makes me mad. Viruses evolve all the time, and there's a strain of bacteria that was discovered in ponds full of factory waste that consumes nylon. This type of bacteria wasn't discovered until 1975, and nylon didn't even exist until 1935. So if things don't evolve, where did it come from? Was it just hanging out since the creation of the Earth waiting for someone to invent nylon? There is a mutation in the LRP5 gene that causes more durable bone growth in some humans. This shit is just objectively wrong. Seriously. Google, motherfucker. Do you use it? Anyway, jumping ahead a bit, we read, Lucy. The December 1976 issue of National Geographic magazine featured what they thought was a major discovery in Ethiopia. It was a collection of bone fragments from a 3.5-foot-tall chimpanzee skeleton. A chimpanzee? A chimpanzee? Lucy was an Australopithecus afarensis, one of over 300 individual specimens that have been discovered. And he just says that! On what grounds? What gives him the right to just blurt out a stupid thing like that? No citation, no explanation, no patience left for your bullshit. It was a collection of bone fragments from a 3.5-foot-tall chimpanzee skeleton found in 1974 by a young American graduate of the University of California at Berkeley, Donald Johanson. The bones were claimed to be over 3 million years old. They named it Lucy because the team was hearing their radio playing a rock and roll song by the Beatles, titled Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. From about 1979, it gained the favor of many evolutionists as the key ape-like ancestor of modern man, even though it is acknowledged to be a chimpanzee, but one that is claimed to have walked upright. Now, there are upright walking chimps living today, but how did they know this old chimp Lucy walked with an erect posture? The evidence was dependent on an interpretation of the knee joint. After a university lecture in Kansas, a well-informed creationist, Mr. Tom Willis, asked Mr. Johanson publicly where he found that important knee fragment. The answer? 1.5 miles away from the west of the skeletal fragment in a rock strata 200 feet deeper. Next question. Why include a fossil fragment so widely separated from the main find? Johanson insisted anatomical similarity was all the justification needed. I have no clue what interaction actually took place between this Willis and Johanson, if any. It's hard to say without any bloody citations to follow up on. Yes, a knee was found before they discovered the Lucy skeleton. To the best of my knowledge, nobody has ever claimed that it was a part of the Lucy skeleton. And it doesn't matter, because they didn't need a knee to prove that Lucy walked upright. They were able to prove that Lucy was bipedal from her pelvis and from her skull. The evidence that Lucy was bipedal is undeniable. It can be proven even to the satisfaction of a young Earth creationist if they would just take the time to actually read up on what the evidence is instead of just parroting citation-lacking assertions by grifters like Dennis Peterson. If you want to hear about how we know that Lucy was bipedal, I am going to recommend a video by Erica, or Gutsick Gibbon, on YouTube. She is a PhD student in biological anthropology, has a Master's of Research degree in primate biology, behavior, and conservation, and minors in anthropology and biology, and she can explain the evidence far better than I ever could. I will include a link to that video in the description. Please do check out her content. She is one of the most intimidatingly brilliant speakers I have ever listened to, and I guarantee you'll learn a lot more over there than you ever will over here. A bloody chimpanzee. I cannot believe, I will not accept that this whole thing was merely Peterson failing to understand the facts. To have even written this much about Lucy, he must have done some amount of research. It simply cannot be that he was being honest when he wrote this stupid book. How many innocent young minds have you intellectually stunted in your pursuit of the almighty dollar? That's all I have for today. I might come back to this book sometime. Let me know if you want to see that. If you want to, feel free to check this book out for yourselves. There is so much garbage in here. There's a whole section about dragons, and about how the Earth used to be surrounded by a floating wall of ice, and the whole thing is just a bucket of chuckles. If you do decide to purchase this book for yourself, please do buy a used copy if you can. Don't support the author. And go into it aware that you won't actually learn anything. About the only thing that you might possibly learn is that young Earth creationism hasn't changed much over the years. Even back then, their literature was just as erroneous, incompetent, and deceitful as it is now. About the only thing you might possibly learn is that young Earth creationism